Right, good evening ladies and gentlemen, it's Antony Carpen here on the 16th of January 2022 and it's cold outside. So this is effectively the first new video of the new year and national politics is all over the place, but this video is primarily about all things local democracy, because what I want to do with this, and I've got my laptop in front of me for good reason, is I want to start looking at the meetings that are happening locally and to try and do either weekly or fortnightly summaries of what you can expect, basically to say to people, look, these meetings are happening, they may be of interest to you. So let's go straight to Cambridge City Council and their democracy website, democracy.cambridge.gov.uk, and we see in their calendar that this week they have cancelled the Development Control Forum, and instead we've got only the Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting, which in the grand scheme of things is all about how to deal with homelessness, or how the city deals with homelessness, and also about repairs to and spending on council housing and social housing. So one of the big differences between this committee and all of the other committees is this committee has representation from tenants who live in council houses, and they are either nominated or elected to basically represent the interests on all things council housing in Cambridge. Now it feels like it's a bit of a kind of like monster package for this one, but basically in the grand scheme of things with this one, and I'm just going to almost kind of like leave it there, the debate here is basically going to, or the main debate is about the budget setting report, because in a few months time all of the local councils all over the country will have to decide what their budgets are, i.e. what their spending plans are going to be. And so each committee is going to have a debate and have a vote on how much money should be spent on which bits and on which policies. And so this is why you've got, for example, item number 7, HRE budget setting report, and then you've got your amendments from the opposition parties, Liberal Democrats, Green and Independents own budget packs. But actually, for those of you who live and work in Cambridge, you've got there's a report on the Hanover and Princess Court and Kingsway Flats, which have been around since kind of the 1960s, and they're basically long overdue major overhauls. So if you have a look at that, you'll see what they have recommended, and it will be up to the councillors to decide whether they go with the recommendation or whether they decide to go with something else. Normally they tend to go with the recommendation, but you can table amendments to these things, and this is actually where some of their policies really do get thrashed out. Right, moving swiftly on, we are now looking at Cambridgeshire County Council's website, and they too have their own meetings pages, which means it's it can be, if you bookmark those pages you can just go straight to them. We have really got two main meetings for this week. One is the Children's and Young People's Committee, so this is both children's services and also funding for early years and primary schools, and this one is chaired by Cherry Hinton's new councillor, that's Brianna Goodliff. And then we've got this, what is a relatively new committee called the Environment and Green Investment Committee, which really came off the back of a lot of campaigning from children and young people over the past few years. The main things to look for in the Environment and Green Investment Committee report, really, especially for those of you who are kind of like forward looking, are the annual carbon footprint of the county council's activities, and it does have large land holdings and a large fleet of vehicles. You've got two quite interesting reports for those of you who really want to get into the academic and public policy side of things, from an institution called the Cambridge University Science and Policy Exchange, which was founded several years ago, really amongst other things to enable early career researchers to really get their teeth into really difficult public policy issues. And I think it was former councillor Ian Manning in one of their Chesterton seats who got this going, and we've got 2 of their reports here which are being presented to councillors along with recommendations. The first of them is for a county-wide decarbonisation fund, and the second one is for a local area energy planning, kind of like peat area zoning. And so for those of you who are really interested in, like I said, in how we're going to get to net zero, because with the government's current plans, I just can't see how we're going to do it. It's worth looking at, okay, what does this mean practically for city and county? We've also got, and I'll leave it here for this one, the Greater Cambridge Local Plans Consultation Response from the County Council. And so this is the County Council's officers going through the 10,000 pages of reports that the City and South Cambridgeshire Greater Cambridge Planning Service have managed to collate for what will become the Greater Cambridge Local Plan for 2030 to 2041. And they have come out with their detailed observations. There's about 24 pages in there, but amongst other things, it basically looks at, for example, those areas where there are proposals to build large numbers of housing at higher than normal density for what you'd expect to see in this part of the country. We don't have skyscrapers, we don't have these huge towers, but one of the things that we're seeing, and one of the things that was controversial last week and is going to stay controversial for quite some time, is the North East Cambridge Area Action Plan. And one of the concerns there is that the proposals for what is currently the sewage works site, which is being moved over to near Fen Ditton, because the central government has decided it will pay for the costs to do so, to enable lots of homes to be built. The huge concern is that the housing density is going to be too dense for people, A, to access green space, because there isn't any accessible green space and not nearly enough provided for on that site, and then secondly, what I think is just the complete lack of large community facilities that not only provides for the 15,000 or so people that are due to live there, but also the existing shortage of things like swimming pools. And the final one, and I've noticed that I'm coming up to 10 minutes here, is the Greater Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority. So the only meeting that's happening here is the Skills Committee meeting, which will be chaired by Lucy Nethsinger, and will have representatives from all of the component councils within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So Councillor Nethsinger, the former MEP, now the leader of Cambridgeshire County Council, will be chairing this. The really big long-term thing here for me is the proposals for the University of Peterborough, much needed in that part of the world, because there aren't any basically higher education institutes of note there, which is one of the reasons why ministers have chosen to fund it. And so the first sets of students should be moving in this September, and within a few years' time it should have 12,000 students on there and be its own independent institution. The initial plan is for it to be under the sponsorship of actually one of my old places, Anglia Ruskin. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. You've also got some big reports on everything to do with adult skills and employment, because one of the big persistent problems, in particular in the north of the county, is the relatively low level of skills in the workforce versus kind of in comparison to the rest of the country, but I think actually more in particular to the needs of the economy in that area. And one of the proposals that I want to put to them is whether the University of Peterborough should actually open a new school of dentistry, because we only have 16 in the country. We've had chronic shortages of, in particular, NHS dentists, and I found out this week that my own dentist has gone private only because throughout the pandemic the entire dental sector has been messed about by ministers over who's going to get what funding and when they can open and when they can't. So he's just said, sod it, I won't do any more NHS patients. So if I want to stay with my local dentist who I can walk to, I've suddenly found, well, I have to pay double the cost now. So you know, it's not going to result in an overnight change, but you know, there you go. Anyway, that's me done. See you next week.